The quickest way to lose sight of justice is to believe you can recognize it at a glance. The morning sun cast long golden reflections across the marble steps of the state capitol, where lawmakers, reporters, government employees, and visitors streamed through the grand entrance with the quiet urgency that always surrounded an important legislative session. Security officers greeted familiar faces, cameras flashed as journalists prepared for scheduled interviews, and the American flag drifted gently above the historic dome against a cloudless blue sky. It looked like any other busy morning in the heart of state government, until one ordinary encounter slowly transformed into something no one standing there would ever forget. Officer Ryan Mitchell stood near the primary security checkpoint with the confidence of someone who believed he could read people within seconds. Years in uniform had convinced him that instincts were often more reliable than patience. Every passerby received a quick glance before being waved through, but then his attention settled on a woman walking alone toward the Capitol entrance. She wore a tailored navy business suit, low heels, and carried a simple leather portfolio instead of an expensive handbag. There was nothing flashy about her appearance. No visible security detail. No waiting motorcade. No assistants surrounding her. She moved with quiet confidence, acknowledging people with polite smiles while maintaining a steady pace toward the building. Her name was Angela Brooks, although no one nearby seemed to recognize her. Ryan stepped directly into her path before she reached the security doors. "Ma'am, this entrance is restricted," he said firmly. Angela stopped immediately, her expression calm and respectful. "Good morning, officer," she replied warmly. "I appreciate your work. I am expected inside." Ryan looked her up and down with visible skepticism. "Everyone says that," he answered. "Credentials, please." Angela reached slowly toward her portfolio. Before she could remove anything, Ryan lifted one hand. "Leave it where it is for now." Several nearby visitors slowed their pace. A television cameraman quietly adjusted his lens toward the unfolding conversation while two legislative interns exchanged uncertain glances. No one interrupted. Public moments have a way of attracting silent audiences. Angela lowered her hand exactly as requested. "If you allow me a moment," she said gently, "I can clear up this misunderstanding." Ryan shook his head before she could continue. People cannot simply walk into a government building because they believe they belong here. His voice was not loud, but it carried far enough for those waiting nearby to hear every word. A few whispered among themselves while others watched with growing curiosity. Angela never raised her voice. She simply met his eyes with remarkable composure. "Officer," she said softly, "every person deserves the opportunity to be heard before a conclusion is reached." Ryan interpreted her calmness as confidence she had not earned. "You can explain yourself after we verify everything," he replied. "Until then, you will remain right here." Angela nodded without protest. She neither argued nor demanded special treatment. Instead, she quietly stepped aside exactly where he instructed, standing with the dignity of someone who understood that character often speaks loudest when emotions remain silent. Around them, the flow of people into the Capitol continued, yet something subtle had begun to change. A legislative aide hurried through the entrance while glancing repeatedly at a ringing phone. Inside the building, staff members checked their watches as an important meeting remained unable to begin. Another assistant emerged from the front doors, scanning the plaza with growing concern before disappearing back inside. None of them looked directly at Angela. None of them realized that the person everyone had begun searching for was standing only a few yards away beneath the Capitol steps, patiently waiting while one officer remained completely convinced he was protecting the building from the wrong person. Angela Brooks remained exactly where she had been asked to stand, her leather portfolio resting comfortably at her side while the steady rhythm of the Capitol continued around her. State employees hurried through the security entrance carrying folders and tablet computers. Legislative assistants crossed the marble plaza balancing cups of coffee, and reporters adjusted microphones in preparation for the morning's scheduled announcements. To everyone passing by, she appeared to be nothing more than another visitor delayed by a routine security check. She made no effort to correct that impression. Instead, she quietly observed the building before her with the familiar expression of someone who knew every hallway, every chamber, and every office beyond those doors. Officer Ryan Mitchell watched her carefully from only a few feet away. The longer she remained calm, the more convinced he became that she was attempting to appear confident rather than actually belonging there. Years of relying on first impressions had quietly shaped the way he interpreted silence. He believed hesitation suggested honesty and confidence suggested deception. Without realizing it, he had already reached a conclusion long before hearing her explanation. "You seem unusually relaxed," Ryan finally remarked. Angela looked toward him with the same composed smile she had worn since arriving. "Remaining respectful usually makes difficult moments easier for everyone," she answered. Ryan folded his arms. "Respect also means following instructions." Angela nodded immediately. "I agree completely." Her response caught him slightly off guard because there was no sarcasm hidden beneath her words. She simply accepted what had been said without argument. A pair of tourists walking toward the Capitol paused long enough to glance at the interaction before continuing toward the visitor entrance. Nearby, two television reporters quietly discussed an unexpected delay to the governor's morning schedule. One checked a phone before whispering, "The meeting still has not started." The other frowned. "That is unusual. They are never late with something this important." Neither reporter noticed Angela standing only a short distance away. Inside the Capitol, another layer of quiet concern was beginning to spread. Staff members moved quickly through polished corridors carrying updated agendas while legislative aides exchanged increasingly anxious phone calls. One assistant stepped into the governor's conference room and quietly informed several department directors that they would need to wait a few more minutes. A senior advisor looked toward the empty chair at the head of the long conference table before asking, "Has anyone confirmed where she is?" The assistant slowly shook his head. "Not yet. We are still trying to reach her." Back outside, Ryan received a brief radio message confirming that additional security personnel would soon arrive to assist with the growing number of visitors entering the Capitol. He acknowledged the transmission before glancing once more toward Angela. "You picked a busy morning to show up without proper clearance," he said. Angela answered gently. "Sometimes the busiest mornings are when patience matters most." Ryan dismissed the remark and looked toward the security checkpoint as another line of visitors formed. He never noticed several Capitol employees leaving the building to quietly scan the plaza with concerned expressions before returning inside. One of them paused long enough to compare a photograph displayed on a mobile phone with the people gathered near the entrance, but from that distance the angle was not clear enough to recognize the woman standing calmly beside the security barrier. The search continued while Angela remained exactly where she had been instructed, never raising her voice, never demanding recognition, and never revealing who she truly was. Around her, an entire government building slowly began searching for one missing leader, unaware that she had never actually disappeared. She had simply been waiting for someone to replace assumption with understanding. Officer Ryan Mitchell had always believed that experience gave him the ability to recognize who belonged and who did not. After nearly a decade assigned to government security, he had grown accustomed to trusting quick impressions more than careful conversations. Every rushed decision that happened to work had strengthened that belief until confidence quietly became certainty. Standing beneath the Capitol's towering stone columns, he watched Angela Brooks with increasing suspicion simply because she refused to become emotional. To Ryan, her composure felt rehearsed instead of genuine. The idea that someone could remain calm while being questioned seemed almost unnatural to him. He glanced toward the steady stream of employees entering the building and then back at Angela, convinced that every passing minute confirmed his original judgment. "You still have not explained why you came through this entrance," he said. Angela met his eyes with quiet patience. "I intended to explain from the beginning," she answered. "I simply have not been given the opportunity." Ryan shook his head before she could continue. People who belong here know the proper procedures. Angela looked briefly toward the Capitol dome before returning her attention to him. Sometimes procedures work best when they are accompanied by listening. Her voice remained warm and respectful, carrying no trace of frustration despite the growing audience nearby. A maintenance worker pushing a supply cart slowed just enough to observe the conversation before continuing across the plaza. Several legislative interns quietly whispered to one another while pretending to organize visitor badges. One elderly couple visiting the Capitol paused near the fountain, sensing that something unusual was unfolding, although they could not explain exactly what. Inside the building, however, concern had begun spreading much faster than anyone standing outside realized. The governor's chief of staff, Benjamin Ross, stood in the executive conference room surrounded by senior cabinet members whose meeting had already been delayed well beyond its scheduled starting time. He checked his watch again before placing another call that immediately went unanswered. "Any updates?" one department secretary quietly asked. Benjamin slowly exhaled. "Nothing yet. Her schedule has always been precise." "Something is clearly wrong." Another aide entered carrying a printed itinerary. "Security confirmed she arrived near the Capitol approximately 20 minutes ago, but no one has seen her since." Those words immediately changed the atmosphere inside the room. Conversations stopped. Chairs remained empty. Coffee cups sat untouched. The silence carried more weight than panic ever could. Back outside, Ryan received another radio transmission requesting all officers remain alert because several senior officials were searching for an unidentified individual expected to attend the morning session. He acknowledged the message without giving it much thought. Important people visited the Capitol every day. Whatever search was taking place surely had nothing to do with the woman patiently waiting beside the security barrier. Angela quietly adjusted the strap of her leather portfolio before looking toward Ryan once again. "Officer, may I ask you one question?" Ryan hesitated before nodding. "Go ahead." "If someone arrived exactly where they were supposed to be, dressed appropriately, cooperating fully, and treating everyone with respect, what would convince you that they truly belonged?" Ryan answered almost immediately. "Proper identification." Angela smiled gently. "That is a reasonable answer." Then she lowered her eyes for a brief moment, saying nothing more. Ryan interpreted her silence as resignation. He never realized it was something entirely different. It was patience. Just beyond the front entrance, more Capitol employees quietly stepped outside, scanning the growing crowd with concerned expressions as an entire government searched for one missing leader while she stood only a few yards away, waiting for assumptions to give way to understanding. Inside the Capitol, the quiet concern that had begun as a minor inconvenience was steadily becoming impossible to ignore. The executive conference room remained filled with cabinet members, legislative advisors, and department directors, yet the chair at the head of the polished walnut table remained empty. Digital clocks continued counting the passing minutes while unopened briefing folders rested neatly beside untouched cups of coffee. No one wanted to begin without the person who was supposed to lead the meeting. Benjamin Ross, the governor's chief of staff, stood beside the conference room windows looking down toward the Capitol Plaza. His phone had become unusually quiet after dozens of unanswered calls, and somehow that silence worried him even more. He turned toward State Security Director Lisa Carter, who had just entered carrying a tablet displaying live security camera feeds from every entrance to the building. "Anything?" Benjamin asked. Lisa studied the screen carefully before answering. Security confirmed she arrived on schedule. After that, there is no verified record of her entering the building. Benjamin frowned. "That is impossible." Lisa slowly nodded. "I agree. Which is why we are expanding the search." Outside, the Capitol grounds continued operating with the appearance of complete normalcy. School groups posed for photographs beneath the historic dome. Reporters rehearsed introductions for afternoon broadcasts. State employees hurried between government offices carrying stacks of legislation. Only a handful of people noticed that more security personnel had quietly begun moving across the plaza, speaking discreetly into communication devices while carefully observing everyone near the entrances. Officer Ryan Mitchell noticed the additional personnel but assumed they had arrived because of the delayed meeting. He remained convinced that his assignment had nothing to do with whatever concern existed inside the building. His attention returned to Angela Brooks, who continued standing exactly where he had instructed her. She neither complained nor checked her watch. She simply looked across the Capitol grounds with calm familiarity, as though every brick walkway and marble column carried memories known only to her. Ryan finally spoke again. "You have been very patient." Angela answered with a gentle smile. Patience often allows the truth enough time to arrive. Ryan gave a quiet shrug. "Truth still requires proof." Angela nodded without hesitation. "It certainly does." Before either of them said another word, one of the additional security officers approached Ryan carrying a small radio. "Command wants every exterior officer to remain alert," he explained. "We are looking for an important state official whose schedule has unexpectedly gone off track." Ryan accepted the information with professional confidence. "Any description?" The officer looked briefly at a notification on his handheld device. "Not yet. They are verifying details before broadcasting them." He walked away almost immediately, continuing toward another entrance. Angela watched the exchange without interrupting. Her expression never changed. She simply adjusted her portfolio slightly beneath one arm before quietly observing the growing activity around the Capitol. Inside the executive offices, Lisa Carter enlarged another security image before stopping suddenly. The camera angle was distant, partially blocked by visitors crossing the plaza, yet one figure caught her attention. A woman in a navy business suit carrying a leather portfolio stood beside the primary security checkpoint. The image lacked enough detail for absolute confirmation, but something about her posture seemed unmistakably familiar. Lisa immediately looked toward Benjamin. "I think I may have found something." Benjamin stepped closer, studying the screen as his expression slowly shifted from concern to disbelief. Without wasting another second, both of them hurried toward the Capitol entrance while, only a few hundred feet away, Angela Brooks remained quietly waiting beside Officer Ryan Mitchell, unaware that the distance between assumption and revelation had just become remarkably small. The atmosphere around the Capitol shifted so gradually that most visitors never realized anything unusual was happening. Additional security personnel appeared at different entrances, speaking quietly into communication devices while maintaining professional composure. Government vehicles rolled onto the property without flashing lights or unnecessary attention, parking discreetly near the executive entrance. Inside the building, department directors remained standing instead of taking their seats, each passing minute making the unexplained delay more difficult to ignore. Benjamin Ross and State Security Director Lisa Carter moved quickly through the Capitol corridors toward the main entrance, accompanied by several members of the executive protection team. None of them raised their voices. Years of public service had taught them that the most important moments often demanded the greatest calm. Lisa continued studying the enlarged security image displayed on her tablet as they walked. Although the camera angle remained imperfect, every passing second strengthened her confidence that she recognized the woman standing near the primary checkpoint. "If I am right," she quietly said, "she has been outside this entire time." Benjamin looked at the screen again before answering. "Then every minute we have spent searching has been spent looking in the wrong place." The elevator doors opened directly into the Capitol lobby, where several legislative assistants immediately stepped aside as the group crossed the polished marble floor. Outside, Officer Ryan Mitchell noticed the increased movement near the entrance but assumed preparations were finally underway for the delayed meeting. He glanced toward Angela Brooks, who remained composed beside the security barrier, her attention resting on the Capitol building as though she had complete confidence that everything would unfold exactly as it should. Ryan checked his watch before speaking again. You have been waiting here longer than most people would tolerate. Angela answered with quiet sincerity. Waiting is easier when you know the truth does not disappear simply because it has not yet been recognized. Ryan gave a polite but skeptical smile. That is an interesting way to look at it. Angela nodded. Experience has taught me that people eventually see what they are willing to examine carefully. Before Ryan could respond, another officer approached carrying an updated radio message. Command says executive staff members are personally joining the search now, he explained. Apparently this meeting cannot begin without one specific individual. Ryan accepted the information with little concern. Who are they looking for? The officer shook his head. They still have not released a name over the radio. They only said every available supervisor should remain observant. He continued toward another security position, leaving Ryan once again alone with Angela. Across the plaza, the Capitol doors opened as Benjamin Ross, Lisa Carter, and several members of the executive protection team stepped outside together. Their eyes immediately began scanning the gathering of visitors with focused determination. Reporters noticed the unusual presence of senior officials and quietly redirected cameras toward the entrance, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Tourists paused in conversation. Legislative aides stopped walking. Even the breeze seemed to fade beneath the growing anticipation that spread across the marble plaza. Lisa slowly lifted her eyes from the tablet to the people standing near the security checkpoint. Her pace suddenly slowed. Benjamin followed her gaze. Both of them stopped almost simultaneously as recognition replaced uncertainty. Without saying a word, they immediately changed direction and began walking quickly toward Angela Brooks. Ryan noticed the approaching group and instinctively straightened his posture, believing they were coming to discuss the delayed meeting. He had no idea that every step they took toward him was also carrying the entire morning toward a single moment that would forever change his understanding of authority, leadership, and the quiet dignity that never needed to announce itself. Benjamin Ross and Lisa Carter crossed the Capitol Plaza with calm determination, followed closely by members of the executive protection team whose expressions reflected urgency without panic. The conversations around the entrance slowly faded as more people noticed senior officials walking directly toward the primary security checkpoint. Reporters instinctively lifted their cameras. Legislative aides stopped in the middle of hurried conversations. Even the visitors waiting for guided tours turned their attention toward the unusual scene unfolding beneath the Capitol's towering columns. Officer Ryan Mitchell immediately straightened his posture, assuming the officials had arrived to discuss the delayed meeting that had occupied everyone's attention throughout the morning. Before he could speak, Lisa Carter's eyes met Angela Brooks, and the concern that had filled her face disappeared instantly. She stepped forward with unmistakable respect. "Governor Brooks," she said warmly, "we have been searching everywhere for you." The words settled across the plaza in complete silence. Benjamin Ross offered a relieved smile. "Governor, the cabinet meeting is waiting for your leadership." We were beginning to fear something had happened. Angela returned their smiles with quiet grace. "Everything is all right," she replied. There was simply an unexpected misunderstanding. Ryan felt the certainty he had carried all morning disappear in a single moment. His eyes shifted from Angela to the executive staff surrounding her, then back again as every conversation he had dismissed replayed itself in his mind. The woman he had questioned, delayed, and quietly embarrassed before dozens of strangers was not an ordinary visitor. She was the elected governor of the state, the very person every official inside the Capitol had been searching for since the morning began. Around them, whispers spread through the crowd with astonishing speed. Several reporters lowered their microphones, realizing they had just witnessed a story none of them had anticipated. State employees exchanged stunned glances while visitors looked from Ryan to Angela, struggling to understand how someone so important had stood patiently at the entrance for so long without revealing her identity. Lisa Carter looked toward Ryan with calm professionalism rather than anger. "Officer," she said respectfully, Governor Brooks never travels with unnecessary attention when visiting the Capitol for routine meetings. She prefers that every citizen entering this building be treated equally. Ryan opened his mouth to respond but found no words that seemed adequate. Angela gently turned toward him before he could speak. Her expression remained exactly as it had been from the beginning of the morning, calm, composed, and free of resentment. "Officer Mitchell," she said softly, "public service is never easy. Every day requires difficult decisions." Ryan lowered his eyes. "Governor, I owe you a sincere apology." Angela gave a small nod. "I appreciate your willingness to say that." She paused briefly before continuing. "But the most valuable apology is one that becomes a lesson, not only for one person, but for everyone who serves the public." Those standing nearby listened without interruption. No one expected anger. No one expected humiliation in return. Instead, they witnessed something far more powerful. The governor had every opportunity to remind everyone of her authority, yet she chose to demonstrate leadership through restraint, dignity, and respect. Benjamin Ross quietly signaled that the executive meeting was ready to begin whenever she wished. Angela adjusted the leather portfolio beneath her arm and smiled gently toward the gathering crowd. Without another word about titles or position, she calmly walked toward the Capitol entrance beside her chief of staff and security director. As the doors slowly opened before her, Ryan remained standing exactly where he had been all morning, watching the woman he had underestimated disappear into the building she had been leading all along, finally understanding that genuine leadership never needed to announce itself because true character had already spoken long before anyone learned the name carried behind the title. As the Capitol doors closed behind Governor Angela Brooks, the busy plaza slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, yet the morning no longer felt ordinary. Conversations resumed in quieter voices, reporters lowered their cameras with thoughtful expressions, and visitors continued their tours carrying a story they would likely remember for years. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained standing near the security checkpoint, watching the entrance where the governor had disappeared only moments earlier. The confidence that had guided every decision since sunrise had been replaced by something far more difficult to confront. Reflection. For the first time in his career, he realized that the greatest mistake he had made was not asking questions. It was believing he already knew the answers before listening. A short time later, Ryan was asked to report to the Capitol Security Administration office located inside the building. The meeting room was simple and professional, furnished with a conference table, several chairs, and framed photographs honoring generations of public servants. Captain Michael Donovan stood beside the table reviewing preliminary reports while representatives from the security division quietly organized body camera recordings, visitor logs, and radio communications from the morning. No one raised their voice. No one rushed to conclusions. Every action reflected the principle that accountability begins with facts rather than emotion. Captain Donovan looked up as Ryan entered. "Please have a seat," he said calmly. Ryan nodded and complied without hesitation. The captain folded his hands before speaking again. "This review is not about punishing honest mistakes. It is about understanding how assumptions can influence professional judgment." Ryan listened silently. Every sentence seemed directed not only at him but at everyone entrusted with serving the public. A member of the training division projected several moments from the security recordings onto a large screen. The video showed Angela Brooks arriving alone, greeting people politely, cooperating with every instruction, and patiently waiting without complaint. The room remained silent while the recording continued. There was nothing dramatic in the footage. No confrontation. No anger. Only a woman consistently demonstrating courtesy while every opportunity to hear her explanation quietly slipped away. Captain Donovan paused the recording. "What stands out to you?" he asked. Ryan took a slow breath before answering. "She cooperated from the very beginning." The captain nodded. "What else?" Ryan looked at the frozen image on the screen. "She never once gave me a reason to doubt her character. I supplied those reasons myself. No one interrupted. The honesty of the admission carried more weight than any formal statement could have. Later that afternoon, Governor Brooks requested a brief meeting with Captain Donovan before leaving the Capitol. Ryan expected to be excluded from the conversation, but instead the captain invited him to attend. Angela entered the room with the same quiet grace she had shown throughout the day. She thanked everyone present for their professionalism before turning toward Ryan. "Officer Mitchell," she said gently, "I hope today's experience becomes valuable rather than painful." Ryan met her eyes with sincere humility. "Governor, I promise you it already has." Angela smiled warmly. Good public service is built one decision at a time. Every person who approaches a government building deserves to feel that they will be treated with fairness before assumptions. Captain Donovan assured her that additional training sessions would be scheduled for the entire security division, focusing on communication, impartial decision-making, and respectful engagement with every visitor. Angela expressed her appreciation. "Improving the system matters more than protecting anyone's pride," she replied. As the meeting concluded, Ryan watched the governor leave with the same quiet dignity she had carried since the beginning of the morning. This time, however, he no longer saw an unfamiliar visitor. He saw a leader whose greatest authority had never come from elected office, but from the unwavering respect she showed every person, including the one who had failed to recognize her. Over the following weeks, the events of that morning quietly became the starting point for meaningful change throughout the Capitol Security Division. Instead of allowing the incident to fade into memory, department leaders chose to examine every step with honesty and professionalism. Training officers reviewed procedures, supervisors encouraged open discussions, and experienced personnel shared stories about moments when listening had prevented misunderstandings. The focus was never on embarrassment. The focus was on growth. Captain Michael Donovan opened the first training session by standing before a room filled with officers from every shift. A large screen displayed a simple sentence rather than a photograph or a report. It read, "Every person deserves to be seen before they are judged." The room remained silent as the captain looked around at the officers gathered before him. "This is not about one morning," he began. "This is about every morning that comes after it." Those words stayed with everyone present. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat quietly among his colleagues, taking notes with a level of attention he had never considered necessary before. He no longer believed experience alone guaranteed good judgment. He had learned that experience without humility could become its own blind spot. During the discussion that followed, officers spoke openly about the pressure of making quick decisions, balancing security with courtesy, and recognizing how easily assumptions could influence perception. No one pretended the job was simple. Yet everyone agreed that professionalism demanded more than efficiency. It demanded fairness. Across the Capitol complex, Governor Angela Brooks continued leading the state with the same quiet discipline that had always defined her public service. She never requested special recognition for what had happened outside the building. When journalists attempted to ask questions about the incident during a press conference, she gently redirected the conversation toward the work of serving citizens. "Public trust grows when institutions are willing to learn," she said. "That lesson matters far more than any individual moment." Her response quickly spread across local news outlets, not because it contained dramatic language, but because it reflected remarkable restraint. Instead of creating division, she had chosen to strengthen confidence in the people responsible for protecting the public. Several weeks later, Governor Brooks was invited to speak at the annual leadership conference attended by public safety professionals, educators, and community representatives from across the state. She stood behind the podium inside a historic civic auditorium, looking across an audience filled with people from different backgrounds, professions, and experiences. "Leadership," she began, "is measured long before anyone learns your title. It is measured in how you treat someone whose story you have not yet heard." The audience listened in complete silence. Every sentence carried quiet conviction rather than emotion. Among those attending the conference sat Officer Ryan Mitchell in the back row, wearing his dress uniform with renewed humility. He was not there because anyone required him to attend. He was there because he wanted to become the kind of public servant who listened before reaching conclusions. As Governor Brooks concluded her remarks, the audience rose together in respectful applause. Ryan joined them, not simply because she held high office, but because she had demonstrated something far greater than authority. She had shown that real leadership never depends on reminding people who you are. It depends on showing them, every single day, through patience, fairness, integrity, and unwavering respect for every person who stands before you, whether they are recognized by the world or remain complete strangers. Months passed, yet the quiet lesson born on the Capitol steps continued to shape far more than one security department. New officers entering public service learned that professionalism was measured not only by enforcing procedures but by honoring the dignity of every individual before reaching conclusions. Veteran officers discovered that years of experience remained valuable only when paired with humility. Across the state, the incident was no longer remembered as the morning a misunderstanding delayed an important meeting. It became known as the day an institution chose to learn instead of defend itself. Officer Ryan Mitchell gradually rebuilt the confidence he had once mistaken for certainty. The difference now was impossible to overlook. He no longer relied on quick assumptions or silent impressions. Every conversation began with a question rather than a conclusion. Every unfamiliar face received the same courtesy regardless of appearance, clothing, or circumstance. His fellow officers noticed the change long before he ever spoke about it. During one routine shift, a young recruit quietly asked Ryan what had transformed the way he approached his work. Ryan looked toward the Capitol entrance where visitors continued arriving from every corner of the state and answered with complete sincerity. The law protects people one person at a time. If I stop seeing individuals and begin seeing assumptions, then I stop serving the law the way it deserves. The recruit nodded thoughtfully, carrying those words into every assignment that followed. Governor Angela Brooks continued leading with the same steady grace that had defined her career long before that memorable morning. She never referred to the incident during campaign events, legislative sessions, or public appearances. Her attention remained fixed on serving the citizens who had entrusted her with leadership. Those closest to her understood why. Titles eventually change. Elections come and go. Character remains. One crisp autumn afternoon, several months after the events at the Capitol, Governor Brooks attended a community open house welcoming students from across the state to learn about public service. Families filled the historic building while volunteers guided children through exhibits explaining how government worked. As Angela greeted visitors, she noticed Officer Ryan Mitchell assisting an elderly couple who seemed unsure where to find the public gallery. He patiently walked them to the correct entrance, answered every question with genuine respect, and wished them an enjoyable visit before returning to his post. He never noticed the governor quietly observing the interaction from across the hall. Angela smiled warmly before continuing her own conversations with students and teachers. She needed no further evidence that meaningful change had truly taken root. Later that afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the Capitol windows and painted long reflections across the marble floors, Ryan briefly crossed paths with the governor once again. This time there were no crowds gathering, no reporters watching, and no unexpected misunderstandings waiting to unfold. Only two public servants passing each other in a quiet hallway. Ryan offered a respectful nod. Angela returned the gesture with a warm smile that required no words. Sometimes the strongest conversations happened in complete silence. As another day of public service came to an end, the Capitol remained what it had always been, a place where countless people arrived carrying different hopes, different responsibilities, and different stories. Yet one truth echoed more clearly than ever before. Real leadership is never announced by an introduction. Real justice is never guided by appearances. The strongest institutions are built by ordinary people who choose fairness before assumption, understanding before judgment, and respect before recognition. Because in the end, a badge may represent authority, and a title may represent responsibility, but only character has the power to earn lasting trust long before anyone learns a person's name.